Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you are listening to the Sounds Show, both on WUSB, the Sounds of Film, and the Sounds Podcast. Today, we're honored to have on the program filmmaker Elan Golod joining us. Elan is here to discuss his latest documentary, Nathan-ism. It's a powerful film where art, memory, and history intersect. Nathan-ism tells the extraordinary story of Nathan Hilu, who was tasked with guarding Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg Trials. Through his vivid artwork, Nathan preserved a rare first-hand account of these historic events, and the film really covers his life pretty interestingly. Um, Thank you very much, Elan, for joining us on the program.
Of course, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is a fascinating film. Can you first start off by telling us what initially drew you to Nathan's story?
Sure. So this has been a long journey. I think it was about 2014 or 2015. I came across an article about an exhibition that Nathan Hilu had at a small museum in downtown Manhattan, and I was initially just captivated by the circumstances of his story. You know, this 18-year-old Jewish kid being asked to guard the top Nazi war criminals and sort of learning about the details of the Holocaust through that experience. And I was just curious to see, what kind of effect does that have on a person? And I was able to get his information. I cold called him, and we built a friendship and this relationship over the last few years of his life, and it's been quite the journey.
Can you explain to our listeners who haven't seen the film and maybe aren't familiar um, with the story, what exactly he was tasked with doing, and how did that lead to his artwork?
Sure. So at the end of World War II, the four Allied powers, the US, uh, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and France, came together to prosecute the Nazi war criminals. Uh, and Nathan was one of a group of US soldiers who was tasked to basically be prison guards and make sure that these Nazi criminals were fit to stand trial and make sure that they didn't attempt to commit suicide. And um, basically, every prisoner had a guard, you know, assigned to his cell, and Nathan each day was assigned to guard a different Nazi prisoner, and they would talk. I mean, they were bored, and were happy to talk to anybody. So he had this really unique perspective of talking to the architects of the Holocaust, while being a Jew himself. And later in life, he, you know, used his artwork to process whatever trauma and PTSD that experience left with him.
It's amazing the access he had to these notorious people in history. Can you give us a little sense of some of the names that our listeners may recognize, people that he claims to have spent some real time with?
Sure. So Adolf Hitler obviously committed suicide at the end of World War II, but other than him, many of the highest ranking Nazis were tried at the Nuremberg trial, most famously Hermann Goering, Rudolf Hess, who's Hitler's number two, Albert Speer, who was so-called Hitler's architect, von Ribbentrop, the foreign minister, basically the who's who of the Nazi leadership.
It's amazing. And he seemed to have, in his interviews in the film, he seemed to have, as someone who was Jewish, a surprising, humane view of some of these people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, Nathan had a certain innocence to him and a basic belief in humanity. And I think at his core, he wanted to see, or like was drawn to any shred of humanity he could find in these people. In certain ones, he could find a little more than with others, but yeah, I mean, he, in some of his writings, he referred to these people as, the type of people you would see riding the subway to work. They weren't, any, super, Aryan beings as Hitler, philosophized, but yeah, they were just normal people who went down a very dangerous path.
One of the things that is explored in the film, which I've heard before, but it's really fascinating the way it comes up in the movie, is this question of how did so many people um, go along with this plan that was carried out by Hitler? Were they just following orders, or if they participated, does that make them evil? And what did you discover in your conversations with him in the movie as it relates to this question?
Yes, I mean, it's an issue that's been explored quite a bit. I mean, I think he was able to differentiate between certain prisoners who were, very ideologically driven and believed in what they were doing, whereas others kind of got carried away and didn't have the backbone to stand up and oppose Hitler. Yeah, I mean, different people have different ways of dealing with those kind of adversities. And yeah, the film explores that to a certain extent.
You mentioned that you heard about his art, and he is an artist. Um, Describe his artwork. It's pretty unique.
Absolutely. So his work is what is considered in the art world outsider art, which is work by artists who may have not had formal training and, you know, are basically using whatever materials they have at hand to just express their inner thoughts. And uh, Nathan worked mostly with Sharpie markers and crayons and, paper that he would get from the local CVS. It was There's a childlike aspect to them. It's some of his work feels almost comic book
Hmm.
esque. Uh, you know, he would use speech bubbles to depict a scene of him talking to one of the prisoners, and you know, in some cases, it's hard to tell whether it's things he actually said or things he wishes he could have said, but is his sort of visual memoir, a way to get all of his memories out there.
The film is about memory a bit, and you said it's hard to tell sometimes whether the things, particularly the words in his drawings, are his actual memories or um, has his memory of events changed through the years. What were you looking to demonstrate in this documentary on the topic of memory exactly?
I didn't set out to make a film about memory. Initially, I was just drawn to Nathan the person and his fascinating story, but when you get to know somebody over a long period of time, additional layers to a person get exposed. And I heard certain stories over and over again, and it was interesting to see how his storytelling and his memories would combine. And I don't want to spoil too much of the journey for the viewer, uh, but there are a lot of twists and turns that are worth seeing in the film.
Absolutely. I hope it's not giving away too much, but there are some questions brought up by different people throughout his life as to how true all of his stories are or not. And you do delve into that in the film, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, I would have been remiss not to go down that path. I didn't want to put his memory on trial, so to speak, but it was a part of the story that intrigued me and I wanted to explore.
He seemed a little upset at one point when you asked him some questions about particulars. He got really, really upset. Um, you described that you had a long relationship with him in the making of this film. Can you tell me a little bit about how you struck that balance between, you know, I guess what one has to do when one gets close to a subject when making a documentary, and at the same time, as you stated, you didn't want to really offend him, I guess, or well, you can explain.
Yeah, no, it was a very delicate balance and something tricky for me personally to find that middle ground. I'll admit it's something I discussed in therapy quite a bit during the process of making the film. Um, but yeah, I mean, I tried to maintain, you know, being a friend to Nathan while also trying to tell the most complete version of this story. So there were times when I had to push his boundaries a little bit. But I'm thankful to say that the relationship was never completely fractured, and we were able to maintain the friendship uh, throughout the last years of his life.
Can you elaborate a little bit about why there were parts of this exploration that were personally hard for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's never easy when you're dealing with somebody who's lived such a long life, to come to him and question some of his stories, and especially when his stories are so intertwined with his identity. It can potentially feel like an attack on somebody, but I tried to do it uh, as delicately and as gracefully as I could.
It's hard because there is anti-Semitism in the world, and there are even some people, unbelievably, who question the Holocaust. Um, was there any fear that in questioning his story, it could, I don't know, somehow aid those people who have those very horrible feelings or ideas?
Um, it was definitely a concern among me and my team. That's one of the reasons that we decided to name the elephant in the room, and there we do talk about Holocaust denialism in the film. Unfortunately, I think that you know whether it's Nathan's story or some other uh, some other person's story, these people will find any reason to not believe. So I didn't feel like that was enough of a reason not to fully explore Nathan's story, and I hope that this can expand the conversation and you know just hopefully add layers to the story, and you know and we'll see how people react to it.
Yeah. You refer to him as a friend. Um, that's not always the case with filmmakers and their subjects, but you clearly said he's a friend. Tell me about your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Nathan unfortunately never married or had children of his own. So when I entered his life, he had a small circle of friends in his life, and I think I sort of became a surrogate grandson to him.
Uh,
When I first got to know him, before we even started filming, and I was working on gaining his trust to make the film, I would visit him about once a week and bring him coffee and a piece of cake from the local diner and just sit there and listen to his stories. And that in itself was fascinating to me. And, you know, slowly the relationship developed, and he felt comfortable letting me bring a camera, and he was always excited whenever I would come visit him and get a chance to show me the latest drawings that he had done since the last time I was there.
what did you like best about him as a person?
I mean, as the film shows, he's just a natural storyteller.
Hmm.
I don't think that he was aware of his storytelling techniques, but he was just very adept at captivating an audience. And yeah, it was just a pleasure to sit and listen to his stories.
He's both a witness to history and he's an artist who's had his work shown. What is most valuable, in your opinion, about his work? Is it the fact that he got to see this very unique part of history and live to tell it, like the facts of that, or is it the artwork itself?
I think those are both kind of intertwined. I think to me, he offers a fresh way of uh, engaging the audience about a subject that normally can be off-putting to an audience, and people will recoil from the grisly black and white images of the Holocaust, but this is a way that you can bring in a new audience, potentially a younger audience that hasn't gotten enough exposure to this history, um, I think that's really valuable.
And what about his artwork? Um, you used the term outsider art. Um, some people know what that is, but can you give us a little bit more about that category of art and why his art fits into this category?
Sure. I mean, Nathan, along with other outsider artists, the sort of financial element of the art world is not a factor for them. They'll be making this work whether anybody's going to look at it or potentially buy it. I mean, the amount of work that Nathan produced is staggering. You know, I've I've seen several thousand pieces that he made just in the last few years that we were filming.
Wow.
Um, and you know, and we haven't been able to track down all of the work that he did throughout his life. So I can't even venture a guess of how many pieces he made over his lifetime. He didn't he wasn't very precious about the work. It wasn't about perfecting the look of it. It was just this very instinctive, get the story onto the paper as fast as possible and, move on to the next story. So to a lay audience, some of his work may not seem as skilled as some trained artists, but there's so much emotion packed into the work that I think that gives it its value.
It's mentioned in the movie that in real life, he would often, as a lot of us do, retell stories over and over again. Um, but in his artwork, because I didn't see all of his artwork, just some of the stuff that he put in the movie, does he
Mm-hmm.
redraw like the same things? Like, did he run out of material? There was a finite time that he was drawing about, or did he draw other things as well in his art?
He definitely did repeat certain scenes in different variations. Though during the filming process, there were definitely times a few years into filming where he would draw something that I had never seen him draw before. Other than Nuremberg, he did draw certain other themes that all had some connection to his Jewish background. He also drew scenes from the Lower East Side of his youth,
Mm-hmm.
um, as well as you know, kind of Jewish folklore stories that he grew up with. So it was all tied to his kind of Jewish lens on the world, but the Nuremberg scenes were so ingrained in his mind that he kept coming back to them over and over again.
One of the cool things in the movie is the animated sequences. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. When viewers are able to see the film and see some of his work, I think they'll understand my first reaction to it, where the work just feels like it's jumping off the paper. And that, to me, as a filmmaker, called for an animation treatment. It took us a while to find an animator that we felt could do Nathan's work justice and make it feel like it was authentically his. We eventually collaborated with a great animator based in Paris, and I gave her a lot of Nathan's work as references, and we did a bunch of tests to kind of see how do we bring Nathan's work to life in a way that feels like it's really his work. And that was a really fun part of the process. Basically, whenever the film delves into his subjective point of view, I used that as an opportunity to jump into an animated sequence and kind of bring the audience into his mind.
I really enjoyed that, and I think audiences will too. And I do understand that you're going to be having some screenings throughout the country. Tell us a little bit about your plans for this movie.
Sure. The film has been playing at film festivals around the world for the past year, but we're very excited that the film will open in theaters in New York starting November 14th. It's starting at the Quad Cinema near Union Square. And then in December, it'll go to Los Angeles, and we have plans for it to go to other cities, but don't have the specifics on that yet. I will mention, I think one of our most exciting screenings so far has been that earlier this year we were invited to screen the film inside the courtroom in Nuremberg and bring Nathan's story sort of full circle and back to where the Nuremberg Trials took place.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. And how did that go?
It was incredible. It was very, awe-inspiring experience to screen the film to an all German audience, you know, people whose grandparents were around when the original Nuremberg trials took place, and they were very receptive to Nathan's story and were very touched by it. So yeah, it was a very unique experience to hear Nathan's words echoing in this room that's so seeped in history.
That's amazing. You knew him for a while, and I was wondering, did you make any arrangements with him in terms of when this film started to be shown around the world? Were there going to be any tie-ins where maybe people could um, have access to his artwork? Do you think this film is going to? I know he wasn't. You kind of implied he wasn't that interested in making money or anything, but will this start to give more attention to his art? Are you planning any events where there will be his artwork shown and the film will be screened? Anything like that?
Uh, I didn't talk about it specifically with Nathan at the time, but that's definitely my team's hope is for the film to bring more exposure to his work, and we do have several events in the works that'll combine exhibitions of his work with the film. Just the success that the film has had so far has gained us like some exposure to. There's a gallery in Berlin that's now interested in doing an exhibition of his work, and several
Wow.
museums in the US that are interested in acquiring some of his works. So, we're slowly doing whatever we can to preserve his artistic legacy.
Well, that must be rewarding. Um, it's mentioned in the film that he would often give away his art. Personal question: do you have any of his art? yourself?
I have quite a large collection that pretty much every time I visited him, he would just hand me a shopping bag full of drawings,
Wow.
and those do add up. So yeah, I have.
Tell me
There,
before we wrap it up, what's your favorite one that he gave you?
my favorite one is actually a portrait of me that he basically he drew me while I was filming him. So it's a portrait of me with the camera uh, filming him, and that's very poignant to me.
Wow, that's really special. Well, tell our listeners, is there a website or anything like that where people can go to learn more about this film? Because I think people are going to be very interested.
Sure. The information about the New York release is on the Quad Cinema's website, which is quadcinema.com. And then the film's website is www.nathan-ism.com. And that has all the information about the film and all of our upcoming screenings.
Elan, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this movie, and I hope that our listeners get a chance to see it.
Thank you so much.
Take it easy. Bye bye.
Bye.